He is the co-founder of South by Southwest and the Austin Chronicle. And now, along with Charlie Sexton and Ethan Hawke, he started a new label called Hawke Black Records.
That came as a surprise.
Yeah.
We did this film called Blaze, and the guy who plays Blaze Foley in it, Ben Dickey, who's
Yeah.
a friend of Ethan's, is an original songwriter. And his career had kind of flattened out when Ethan and I started talking about Blaze. I said, who's going to play Blaze? And he goes, well, I got this friend. His music career isn't working out. He's really depressed. He's sitting on my couch a lot. I think maybe he'll play Blaze. And I look at Ethan and I go, oh, that sounds like a good requirement, you know. But it turned out he's a really wonderful actor. He won an acting award at Sundance for Blaze, which is his first film.
Wow.
And then he's really a gifted singer-songwriter. So Ethan and Charlie and I said, let's put an album of his, you know, Ben's original stuff. And a woman who works for me named Erica Pintips, I said, we'll just stick it on iTunes. And Erica said, well, let me make some phone calls.
Yeah.
She came in a couple of days later and says, well, Dual Tone, we'll put it out there. Not that excited about an album, but they would love it if you had a label. And Charlie and Ethan have been cracking themselves up with names for a label, like Sex Hawk, Sex Black. Right. It was, at one point it was Sex Black Hawk, and then Ben's wife said, no, that's way too militaristic. So they said, you can have a label. So I was really like, okay, we'll call it Sex Hawk Black. And then all of a sudden, like, we all started thinking, like, oh, we could do this, we could do that. So now, actually, we're going to have a label, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And I want to say really quickly, Ben Dickey's album is called A Glimmer on the Outskirts, and it's due out March 8th.
I'm so glad
2019.
you knew that, because I didn't know that, and
Thank
I
you.
should've.
You can thank Erica for that info.
Yeah,
she's very good with that.
I know I'm supposed to know the name of it, but I know it's coming out March 8th.
Yeah, you know that.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any plans for, I mean, have you signed other artists yet, or have you looked at other, do you have an A&R department?
Certain people within the day of the announcement called us up and gave tapes.
I'm sure
and
they
we
did.
could have pretty much predicted who it was going to be beforehand.
Right.
I don't think we're interested in signing anybody right now because we really want to work Ben. And this project we thought would cost, you know, X amount of dollars,
Right.
and it's costing X times 20.
Sure.
But there's some reissue stuff we're really interested in doing. There's some archival stuff we're really interested in doing. There's some new recordings we're talking about, but it's stuff like Dual Tone owns a lot of the Chuck Berry material.
Okay.
So what if Charlie Sexton produced an album, a tribute album to Chuck Berry, because everybody loves Charlie.
Yeah.
And everybody wants to play with him. And so, you know, it's that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But we had a 3-hour meeting the other day, and everything I've ever done, it's been other people coming to me and saying, why don't we do this? My guess is, what you should all know.
I've noticed that.
I'm a fan, that's all. And I'm an inspired bureaucrat, and I'm a fan. I mean, some people came and said, let's start a weekly paper. Some people came and said, let's start a regional convention. You know, Ethan came and said, I want to do a movie about Blaze. So I just sit there. That's my one strength is I sit there. I don't move a lot. And people come and say, let's do this. So the other day we had a 3-hour meeting, Charlie and Erica and I. And about halfway through the meeting, I suddenly thought, wow, this label could really be something, as Charlie and Erica talk. So once again, I got on the right train at the right time. I think it's going to be. We talked to Ethan the other day, and Ethan's rehearsing a play. He's going to do True West with Paul Dano.
Oh, right, yeah. And
Ethan's like so intense. So he said, okay, I only talk to you for a little while because I'm memorizing this play and my head is full, you know? And so we talked for about 15, 20 minutes. We're going to go see him at the beginning of January. We're going to watch the play and then talk afterwards. But I'm beginning to see where this could actually be a real label and could do some interesting stuff.
Yeah. You've been in Austin since the late 70s, early 80s?
I came here in 76.
76. And it was Leonard Maltin.
What happened was when I was a kid, I grew up in Teaneck, New Jersey.
Right.
So when I was 12 years old, I met another kid. I fell in love with movies when I was like 9.
Right.
When I was 12, I met another kid in town named Leonard Maltin, who then later on went on to Entertainment Tonight and put out TV movie books. It made us all feel, I felt like enough of a slacker anyway. Len sold his first volume of TV movies the summer after high school. And then every year he was in college, he sold a different film history book. You know, at that point, I'm barely writing papers. You know?
Right.
So, but when we were 12, we started going to New York together to watch movies. and had, I mean, we had an incredible time. We were, New York was easy then. We saw tons and tons of movies that nobody else had seen,
Right.
later on. And then I went to college, and I was an English graduate student. I came to Austin as an English graduate student, and I hated it. I was bored to death. And then said, I knew some people in the film department.
Yeah.
Why don't you go visit them? So I went and visited them. And I really liked them. At one point, they said, anytime you want to become a film graduate student, you can. And my thought was, I'm always so smart. I thought, you don't study film in college.
Yeah.
Yeah, come on. But after another year of half a year of being an English graduate student, I went to the film department and said I'd like to become a film student. And I became a film graduate student, one which I had a spectacularly great time doing. But almost everybody I work with now, we met there.
Yeah, that's what I noticed
so
about
I owe
that.
Len big time, but I've always owed Len.
Well, it's a sense of community that you became a part of, and I saw you talk about that. You actually said that, that basically all the people that you work with now are people that you met in that RTF.
There are new people.
But those are the basic ones.
We had people all the time, but my partner Nick Barbaro, who I started the Chronicle with,
Right.
And we started South by Southwest with Roland Swenson and Louis Myers. I met Nick was another graduate film student. We became friends then. We met Roland shortly thereafter because we were all hanging out at Raoul's, and he was an undergraduate RTF student.
Right.
I mean, so a lot of the people I work with, I've worked with for a really long time.
Yeah. Did you ever see the Violators at Rolls?
Actually, I did. And that was a band that was more legend than scene.
Yeah.
I mean, because they didn't play that many gigs.
Right.
We used to talk about the Violators all the time, especially like a year or two later when, Kathy, or maybe, I don't know when, but Kathy joined the Go-Go's and Carla started the Textones and Jesse was in the Skunks. And
Right.
So it was one of those bands that changed everything.
Right.
Because it was Jesse, and I don't know who else was with him, but who walked into Raoul's, which was a Mexican bar on the Drag,
Right.
and said, "What if you played punk?" And that's where everything, in fact, my entire life, even though I wasn't there, comes from that moment. Because Raoul's is where, where it all
was all
happened.
going on, yeah. So do you spend a lot of time there? Who all did you see there that would blow our minds?
Patti Smith showed up. I mean, there were famous people.
Right, kind of Max's people.
And, of course, now that you ask, I'm not going to remember.
Right.
But it was things like, watching the Big Boys, their third gig, and
Right.
they just blew your mind. It was the night the Huns were busted. And the Huns couldn't really play instruments, but they could, excite violence. So that was pretty cool. And then the Huns afterwards, because they didn't really want to rehearse a lot.
Yeah.
But they were very hot because they'd been arrested. So they would go up to people who they knew wanted to start bands.
Right.
And say, why don't you be an opening act for 2 weeks before the gig? So any number of bands that later became very well known started because the Huns had asked them to open. So I think Standing Waves came about that way. There's a bunch of them, which I don't recall. So the whole amazing thing about Raoul's was the whole punk trip, which was there's only difference between who was in the audience and who was on the stage was about 1.5 feet.
Yeah.
And I think that's dominated everything I've ever done.
Yeah.
Which is the notion is that, and I've hung out with, major league talent and big stars, and the only difference is that with them and the fans is one, perseverance. Sometimes it's unique talent.
Yeah.
But more often than not, it's literally doing it.
Yeah. That's what I got a lot. You directed a documentary for American Masters on PBS, right?
Yes.
About Richard Linklater.
Co-directed, yes.
Co-directed, yeah. And that's one of the main things from that group, that community of filmmakers is like, just do it. I don't know, I can't remember what the name of Robert Rodriguez's book is, but he basically was like, here, just you get a camera and you make a movie. That's how you do it.
Something with the crew. I can't remember.
Yeah,
the name of it. I used to talk about this because the difference between Robert Rodriguez, when he was 10 years old, his dad bought a video camera with a deck. And he had, and when he was 14, his dad bought a second video camera with a deck. And he used the two decks to teach himself how to edit.
Right.
Now, using a deck is nearly impossible. Using two decks to edit, I still have no idea how he did it because they weren't the same deck.
Right.
I mean, but he did it because nothing was going to stop him.
Right.
One day, Lee Daniel, who became Nick's cinematographer, came home and there was 20,000 feet of film in the refrigerator, and so he and Rick went out and made Slacker. Nick Barbaro and Joe Dishner came with me and said, let's start a weekly paper, for which we had not enough money by no idea of what it even meant, and we did, and it worked.
Right.
You know, Lewis Myers and Roland came to Nick and I and said, let's start a regional conference. And literally, like, we said, okay, great. We talked about it a lot. And then we sent letters saying, please come to us. We had no idea what we were doing. None. I mean, you know, we hadn't booked hotels. We hadn't booked hotel rooms. We hadn't created panels. We just did it. And in Austin, again and again and again, it happened. Mike Judge is a phenomenal bass player. He's a bass player's bass player. Like when Doyle Bramhall Jr. and Sr. played together, the first phone call went to Mike to see if he'd play bass with him. And he was in a band called Anson Funderburg and the Rockets.
Right.
And my friend Johnny Reno was the sax player. Johnny just told me the story recently. And one day Mike walks in and goes, well, I think I'm leaving the band because I'm going to do cartoons. And Johnny looks and goes, are you crazy? This is a steady paycheck. And then Mike went and did Beavis and Butthead, you know. I mean, when people tell me I would only do it if, you know, I write my novel if.
Right,
I would form a band if.
If,
You know, that if is bullshit. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not unusually talented. I'm just kind of dumb. And I had the real advantage of I was a disastrous student when I was a kid, so I was completely used to failing. I was, even before, like, I was ADD, but at that point you were called an underachiever, which meant lazy and stupid.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I expected to fail, and I mostly succeeded at failing. So when we started stuff and we failed, it was like, okay. You know what I mean? And if you're used to failing and that's what you think is going to happen, you can't be stopped. I mean, what, you're going to embarrass yourself? Well, you've embarrassed yourself a lot already.
Yeah.
You're going to lose money. You don't have any money.
Yeah.
You know, you just do it. And we just did. And we were part of a whole generation of people who just did it.
Yeah. I mean, there's that whole group of people, but also you were doing it at a time when there were gatekeepers for everything. Like now, you can make a movie on your iPhone. Before, you were saying there were 20,000 feet of film, so they decided, because film costs money, and renting the cameras cost money. You couldn't just do it with the means that you had now. I think that you referred to it in a TED Talk as aggressive democratization. Is that right?
I
said
don't
that?
remember saying that, but it sounds like me.
Sounds good.
One of the things that everybody misses is, at one point at the Chronicle, they called some people had my screen, the film editor, meet them in Book People.
Okay.
And they blindfolded them and took them to a field where they burned me in effigy. And evidently they were burning me in effigy because I was stopping them from doing their creative work. And one I told him, why didn't you tell me? I could have followed you out there and then walked out when the fire was going. But he didn't. But and it was ridiculous because everybody I know is they're looking for something. Yeah. Every musician, every filmmaker, everybody's looking for something that blows them away. Yeah. It gets harder. You know, I've been looking at films now for over half a century, seriously. So for something to, you know, excite me is a lot more difficult than it was when I was starting out. For a film to, you know, get me going, or music. But the whole idea is looking for new stuff. When Jonathan Demme and I were friends for 35 years, and a lot of that friendship was him sending me music. It was mostly music, but sometimes films, or me sending him music or a short film that blew me away. And what was really cool at a certain point was if I sent Jonathan a film and he loved it, I could tell the filmmaker, and they were so thrilled. Yeah. You know, sometimes actually shit happened from that. Yeah. Alejandro Escovedo ended up composing music for some of Jonathan's films. You know, Invasion of the Luna People, a film by David Boone. There's a clip of in Something Wild. But more than that, this, you know, one of the great American filmmakers not only had seen their film, but loved it. And when he got to meet him, because he came to town, he was just more excited to meet them than they were to meet him. And what people really get is, we're not the enemy. You're the enemy. I mean, work your ass up. Work every day. Do not stop. And whenever I was rejected, it was never like, oh, the schmucks rejected me. You know, I mean, there's an alternative weekly association called the Association of Alternative News Weeklies. Right. And we were like 5 years into the Chronicle, which was, you know, a disastrous experience early on. But we went to the first, to a convention. They'd been meeting for years, but finally we found out about it. And it was in Maine. So we landed in Boston. We drove to Maine. Nick was with me and Jeff Whittington, and they were in T-shirts. But hey, I had a button shirt in the trunk, which was wrinkled, but so I had put it on so it looked cool. Right. And we walked in, and we didn't kind of realize that one Alternative Weekly was doing perhaps better than we thought, and that most of the people there were like publishers or ads, so they're all really well dressed. And then I walked in, I turned to Nick, and I said, "Well, we've met the future, and as usual, we're badly dressed for it." But you know, we learned. And they rejected us. We tried to become a member of the organization, and they said we weren't good enough. So instead of going home and sitting around talking about what schmucks they were, we
Right.
sat around, we went back and said, how can we improve the paper? How
Yeah.
can we make the paper better? And a year later, we were accepted. And within a few years, we were kind of legendary because Nick and I were independent.
Right.
And we spent much more time covering our local music scene and our local film scene than other papers.
Yeah.
And then after South by, they all began following what we were doing because they came here and they went, wow.
Right.
But literally, you work every day. You get up in the morning and you're depressed for a little while because everything's against you, and then you go to work. And you work and you work and you work. And then if nothing happens, you work some more.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question before we open the floor to the audience questions? I have a question about starting South by Southwest and the first South by Southwest.
Yes.
So what was the impetus for doing it?
In New York, there was a big event called the New Music Seminar.
Right.
Which was, everybody came. And Roland Swenson, who worked for us at the Chronicle, had gone to it a couple of times. Was really got what was going on.
Right.
And two of the guys from New Music Seminar came to Austin because they were going to start a regional branch of the New Music Seminar. And thank God for cocaine, because they didn't. And they got strung out and they couldn't do it. And I wake up every morning and thank cocaine. And so Roland, who worked for us.
Most people that don't do it think cocaine.
Yeah, exactly. That wasn't my problem. So Roland Swenson and Louis Myers came to Nick and I and said, why don't we do it? And I said no, because I'm always really right there. I said no, because we were still bi-weekly. We were every other week. At some point, we were going to go weekly. We weren't making any money. I was depressed a lot of the time, as I mostly was. And it just seemed like, why tackle another thing? But we talked about it. And then fairly early on, I think it was Louis Myers said, we could end with a baseball tournament. I was dead in the water because Nick loves nothing more than sports.
Right.
And wait, a baseball tournament?
Yeah.
So at that point, I said, fine, I'm in. Why not? And so we decided to do it. We decided in November of 1986. And literally, we would sit around the office of the Chronicle, the four of us, smoking a lot of pot and talking about what this would be. And,
Right.
And one of us might be lying down on the floor, and one of us might be sitting in a chair, and somebody else might be lying on a desk, and we would talk, and we would talk. And one of the things about Nick Barbaro, my partner, is that the only thing Nick likes more than a 4-hour meeting is a 7-hour meeting. And I'm I'm into a 4-minute meeting. I have no attention span.
Right.
But we began to really talk about it, and began to, and I'm lying, and it was going to be regional, 5 states, Texas, Louisiana, Colorado, and we're trying to name it. And I'm lying on the ground, and I say, I'm thinking of North by Northeast by Hitchcock, and I said, what about South by Southwest? And Roland picks up a piece of paper within a minute and writes SXSW, and we all looked, and it was like, okay.
Yeah.
Naming the Chronicle was harder. The Austin Eye, the Austin Reader. As soon as we said, and we knew it, and it was going to be 14 states, and so with the audacity, we started inviting bands and registrants. We never booked a hotel. We were learning as we went along. The best thing was we would call up record company people to ask them to be panelists, and so you'd be on the phone for a long time, and finally they go, okay, all right, it's Austin, it's kind of cool, I'll come. And then you go, look, you have an expense account, right? Will you buy a registration? We need the money. And it's only $40. And a lot of them did. And they came in that first year, we were hoping for 300. I remember at one point, Nick was really practical. Nick said, well, we could always hold it at the Y. And when Nick has an idea like that, he falls in love with it.
Yeah.
And Roland and Louis Myers looked like they were both ready to go, to take him out back and just kill him. And we said, no, probably not the Y. So we did the first year. 700 people showed up, 150 or 200 bands, and
wow.
And then we didn't, it was regional for weeks. By the second or third year, it was national and then international. And Roland had said to me, why don't we get papers like ours in the region to co-sponsor?
Yeah.
They'll give us ads, they can send a band.
Yeah.
And we hadn't even, I said, sure. And I, at that point, knew most of them, so I wrote them, and 14 papers said sure. And we didn't really think it through. Roland did, but suddenly we had a regional presence.
Right.
And we had bands from all over the region.
Yeah.
Most of the bands were Austin, but we had
Right.
and most of the bands sent the writer because it wasn't that much money.
Yeah.
And what we hadn't thought through was at that point the Chronicle focused on Austin music, and these guys came from New Orleans and Tucson and Phoenix.
Yeah.
And they pick up a paper, and the paper's only writing about local bands. You know?
Yeah.
We may be reviewing the new Grateful Dead album, but we're sure as hell talking about every band that's doing a local release.
Right.
At that point, we used to do twice a year. We'd list local releases, which would be like about a half page.
Right.
You know, by a few years later, I don't know if we could even have done that. You know, but and most of them went home and started writing about their local bands.
Right.
Because they really, and so it was the whole beginning of DIY to begin with.
Right.
But suddenly, like we could do that, and we had Michael Corcoran was our columnist, who literally like insulted and attacked local bands.
Yeah.
So not only do we write about local bands, but we made fun of them.
Yeah, yeah.
It got to be a tone changer, and I didn't even realize that for many years.
Yeah.
That's what happened. But one of the reasons it succeeded was Austin. I used to. When people would ask why South by Southwest worked, I would always say, well, anybody can get laid in Austin, Texas. And I knew things were getting a little bit further along when they asked me to stop saying that. So then I said, well, the pot's so cheap. And that one they shot down immediately.
Right.
But it was like, I finally came to realize later on, because like hundreds of cities tried it afterwards,
Yeah.
literally hundreds. And I've been a writer for a long time, but I'm not really a good writer, and I have awkward sentence structure
Right.
because I really don't know grammar. And so they would I did a lot of the early publicity material and stuff,
Yeah.
and I would read from other cities, and there would be a sentence and go, I wrote that sentence because nobody else could have. But there's no place else, I think, in the world that had as many like big bands or cult bands as Austin.
Right.
Like when our friends tried in Toronto, they knew all the biggest bands in Canada. Tragically Hip, Blue Rodeo, Cowboy Junkies.
Right.
But those bands couldn't play a club or there'd be a riot.
Right.
But what in Austin you had Jimmy Dale Gilmore, Butch Hancock, Joe Ely, Luann Barton, the Leroy Brothers,
Timbuk 3 even,
Timbuk
like the
3.
yeah.
No, they're a little later.
A little later, all right.
I should let that go. They don't know. But you had bands like that.
Yeah.
And and they could play in Scandinavia, they could play in England, they could play on the West Coast, they could play in the East. They couldn't play everywhere, but they all had their. And all of a sudden, it's like, hey, go see Joe Ely in Austin. Go see the Leroy Brothers in Austin.
Yeah.
And so people came the first year, and then it just kept going.
That's amazing.
It was,
What do you think of it now? What do you think of what it's become? The monster. It's giant.
Yes, it's very big.
The president spoke here. Bruce Springsteen. When you guys started, you didn't think Bruce Springsteen or the president were going to be speaking at these things?
Well, Roland was the visionary, and he kind of had a handle on it. I don't think he thought. And I had no earthly idea. Michelle Obama spoke one year.
Right.
And we went and met her, and she was really great. I was like shaking to meet her, and she was wonderful. And outside, Queen Latifah was sitting, and so we went over to say hello, and I told her I was from New Jersey, and you can't imagine how excited she was to meet another white boy from New Jersey. And my friend Fab Five Freddy was coming to stay with me the next day, and I mentioned this to Freddie and said, well, if you had told her I was coming to stay with you, I got her signed and I did her first 2 videos.
Oh, right. It
And I was
wouldn't make me look red.
Why didn't I think about it? But the growth of it was extraordinary. It was amazing because I really believe in it. I really think that there's 2 things it's about. One is punk. The only difference between the audience and who's on stage is how far you're willing to go to get on stage,
Right.
how hard you're willing to work.
Right.
And the other thing I really think about is you learn best from peers. When the whole idea was you would go there and you would get to talk to people. I thought one of our most inspired early panels was a signed and dropped. Because at that point, everybody in the world thought, I'm signed.
Yeah.
I'm home. Everything's
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And then you got dropped, and you get signed, and the guy who signed you had a heart attack the next day. Right. And actually, I know cases where that happened. Or the band, everybody was behind you, and you didn't sell. And so it was really like a learning experience. I'm not as involved in it as I used to be. It's really big. I wouldn't go if I wasn't like a founder, and
Right.
But I'm older, and I've been through a lot. When I'm in the heart of it, when it's really banging, and banging to me is I'm not talking sexually. When
No, I know
banging
you-
is what it's all about to me. I mean, when
Yeah.
you're working with somebody and you start banging,
Yeah.
you're hitting ideas on ideas.
Yeah.
You're writing and it's going.
Yeah.
When you're in the middle of it, and you can feel it. You can feel people. You can feel the energy. You can feel the excitement. You still hear stories about people who are waiting online and they meet somebody else and they start a band or they make a movie and it happens.
Right.
People come. I mean, it's not what it was, and nothing is what it was. And I got to be honest, the early days were just unbelievable. It was phenomenal. And then when we started film, the statesmen made fun of us for the first film festival because they said, this looks like the Friends of Lewis Black. And we're going, yeah, well, that's the idea. And in fact, it was people I didn't know who I wanted to know, like Toby Hooper and Nesmith, who produced Repo Man. But it was like, well, yeah, I mean, there's 500 festivals. What do we want a little friends, we want a boutique festival where we can show our friends films. And then I kind of didn't take into account how important Rick Linklater was in the world.
Right.
And that, Robert moved back home, Robert Rodriguez,
Right.
then Mike Judge moved down. And so it's like the fourth year or the fifth year, and we're having a party at my house, and I'm looking around the room, and there's Robert Rodriguez and Richard Linklater and Guillermo del Toro and Steven Soderbergh and Quentin Tarantino and Kevin Smith and I had like two thoughts. The first was really like if the roof falls in, American independent film is really bad
over.
shape.
Yeah.
And then the second was classic me. It was like, oh shit, what the fuck are we gonna do next year? How do we even match this?
Yeah.
It was like we peaked too quickly. Next year was really good too, but we won't go there. The whole thing was a surprise, and now I still love it. I think the energy's there. I think the people who, we've been attacked in every way you can possibly be attacked. But one again, I've been expecting that since I was a kid. That was school,
Right.
and then also with the Chronicle, I'm always used to people,
mad at you
saying
for
horrible
something.
things about us. People were always accusing us of selling out, which never made any sense. But I began running a price list. Like, if we liked your album, we write a favorable review for $15. If we didn't like your album, we write a favorable review for $40. And I'd run the price list periodically. Because at a certain point, when you're working your ass off, everybody's going to criticize you. Lots of people are going to criticize you, and usually you're way too busy
to deal with it.
But I took some of it personally, and one time we were at Waterloo, and we were selling wristbands, and the turnout was more than we expected, and it was a really, really hot day. And Roland had gone off with a couple of staff people to go buy ice and water, so we give people on the line ice and water. And I'm standing to be in line because I think Waterloo's moving slowly, and so I'm trying to rush him in. I have my hand in my pocket, and like somebody takes a photo, and it becomes about how I'm standing there counting money. That's what I'm doing. So I said, yeah, actually, I'm using my balls as an abacus, and I'm counting the money. This is not perhaps my smartest move, because people got a lot more mileage than I might have thought.
Yeah.
But when you work with people who you care, when you love what you do, and when you care about what you do, and when you work all the time, when I leave here, I'm gonna go home and work, because that's what I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
I wasn't doing anything for a little while. I'm working with some amazing people. And like literally, first we get a record label, had that happen. And then I've had like 2 film projects, one in the last 3 days that I would have once dreamed about. Somebody calls you and goes, what about?
Wow.
So I got to go home and work on those. But that happens. So everything that ever happened to me came from me sitting home, often stoned, and somebody would call. So I spent a lot of time sitting home stoned because that works.
But also getting involved with the things is what...
Once I'm involved, you can't stop me. And it's not just me. Sometimes people say, well, you've done this. I never did anything alone. I was always in a community of people.
Yeah.
A community of people who actually cared and who had each other's back and who worked really hard. Linklater and I were at dinner the other night when we started talking about scene politicians, like, in the music scene or the film scene. Politicians, they don't want to do the work, but they want to get the power.
Right.
And, and LA is lousy with them, and New York is lousy with them. And Rick and I figured there had been 2 in Austin in film, and we can name one. But we figured there must have been another one. Right. And then in last, there's nobody, that they're playing a game nobody else is playing. Right. Everybody else cares about the work, and they're excited to see other people's work. And it really has been, when I talk about it, sometimes I take my films to other states or countries and I start talking about what goes on in Austin.
Yeah.
And I stop at some point and go, there's no reason for you to believe me. I mean, this sounds like I'm making it, like everybody's home doing, cocaine and raping dogs. But the reality is even different. The reality is better.
Yeah.
The amount of stuff I've gotten to do because somebody said, hey, can you help? Or I've gone to somebody and said, what about this?
Right.
And when somebody's in trouble, the phone starts ringing, and everybody doesn't go, well, they go, what can I do?
Right.
Where do you want me?
Right.
And that's an extraordinary experience.
Yeah. Well, I think that's like the overwhelming theme of your life is the community that you've gotten to be in.
I thought it was to sit around and be stoned, but
yeah. I was going to say that, but I was trying to make it seem a little better.
No, the thing is, do it. I mean, don't do it. Don't sit around and think why you're not doing it or what's stopping you from doing it or how you're not appreciating it. Just do it. And I never expected to succeed. I think I was driving over here and I was thinking how kind of ridiculous it was. One, I shouldn't be allowed to drive, as everybody who works with me knows. Many people called today to see if I wanted to ride because they don't like me in the car. But I was thinking about, I've been, I'm lucky beyond all comprehension because I'm a fan. I could be home collecting comic books, which I do, and I would be happy. But instead, I've gotten to be part of remarkable things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for being part of this. Ladies and gentlemen, Lewis Black. Does anyone have any? We have time for 2 quick questions. 2 quick questions. Anyone? Yes, sir.
Hi, thank you so much for being here for us. I'm Alexis Scarpulari. I've been in Austin for the past 11 years, and I've been trying to build up a media scene here because everybody is so hermetic about their work. So it's hard to build a scene, and somehow you've managed to build a scene that covers many things. What advice do you have for somebody that's trying to help a media scene happen in Austin, for the ones that want to share?
Yeah, the truth and the reality is that I had almost no ambitions. I mean, I had no self-confidence. I had no self-worth. So whatever I did, I just kept doing. And some of it was I got really lucky. And sometimes I say, well, I got really lucky. And people go, oh, no. Yeah, I got really, really lucky. I came here. If I'd gone to L.A. or New York, nothing would have happened. And but whenever anybody came and said, let's do something, and I said yes, then I was in 150%. And if it didn't work, I was in 150%, and I wasn't going to leave until it worked. And sometimes I was pretty stupid. I mean, I kept the things way past rational point. And the remarkable thing is, it worked. My metaphor for my whole life is Roadrunner. I go flying off that cliff, and sometimes you actually go pretty far in space, and sometimes you crash. But, when you crash, you don't die. You dust yourself off, get up and run off the cliff again.
Persistence, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Well, we look forward to Ben Dickey's release on Hawke Black Records, and congratulations on that, and congratulations on all of your great successes that you just happened to stumble into.
The best thing is that I never look back. I almost died in 2011, so I look back a little. But most of the time, I'm really worried about what we're doing next.
Yeah.
I'm convinced it's not going to work, despite enormous evidence to the contrary. So I'm excited about the people I'm working with now. I'm excited about, really concentrating on the music awards. When I left the Chronicle, I kept them working with Celeste Casado, who's beyond amazing, and Charlie Sexton.
Yeah.
And now we have a record label, and now some film projects. So, I'm going to go home. The best part is when I get home, because then I can, go to work.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. Thank you so much, Lewis Black. Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
I tend to go wrong. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Once again, we would like to thank all of our partners, Native Hostel, South by Southwest, VinylMnky, and, of course, to the Cultural Arts Division for its continued support. I want to let you know that in the raffle now, there are 2 tickets to the Austin Music Awards. So go and check out the raffle in the Marketplace room. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Johnny Goudie. I have a podcast called How Did I Get Here? You can find it on all the places where you find podcasts. You can find our conversation maybe later this week or next. Thank you, guys. Yeah, thank you so much, Lewis.